welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for doing this.
Good to be here. Yeah.
So I got Chris Henderson here from B&E. Is it Contractors?
Contractors, yeah.
What's the B&E stand for?
B stands for Bob, N as in short form for and E as in Eckhart. So they were the original founders, B&E Contractors, Bill and Eckhart.
Right, okay, cool.
And funny enough, Bill had an allergic reaction to epoxy, so he had to leave the industry in the first year. So now it's kind of break and enter is the big joke. B&E?
B&E.
Yeah.
That's a cool brand. Thanks again for doing this. Everybody, I got Chris here. We're in tech together. And we're at our retreat at Hockley Valley. It's beautiful out here. We figured we'd take a drive. So, just for the people that have no idea who you are, I mean, some people that are watching might, but it's, maybe just give us a little introduction in terms of like where you've come from, what you've been up to, and what you're doing these days.
Sure. So I grew up in London, went to Clark Road School, then to Lucas, went to Fanshawe College and thought I would become an accountant. In fact, I never graduated high school. I dropped out twice and just didn't like the structure of high school. And so I went to college as a mature student, got into Bean County. And when I had got into Bean County and was a controller for an automotive parts company, I realized I didn't like accounting. And
I was going to say, you're like, so, really?
Yeah. So, and I had always heard that, you're probably better in sales and running teams and, motivating people and stuff. So I was asked to leave the controller's position and start up a new division doing plastic dip moldings. So in automotive, your seat handle that we could adjust the seat with will have a little rubber coating on it.
Yeah.
Glove boxes have coatings on it to stop that rattle when you're driving. And so I got into that, and we started up this division, and we built it to about 85 employees, and about a $10 million company.
Awesome.
And the owner and I just decided that we saw differently in how we wanted to take the direction of the company, and he owned it, I didn't, so I left. So I was looking around, and I'm like, do I want to get back into accounting? Do I want to go into finance? Do I want to get into operations management? And B&E Contractors was the only construction company that I applied to, and they were running an ad for a general manager. And so I applied, and I sat down with the owner and his wife at that time and their accountant, and I just saw that they were stuck being a mom and pop shop.
Right.
They, at the time were doing about $3 million in sales, and had 20 people, but they couldn't seem to put the right people and systems in place to grow the company. So I came on in 2004, and I'll just fast forward, and I know we'll come back to some of this stuff.
No, it's all good. Yeah.
In 2008, I bought the company from them 100%, and I own it today. So it's been 9 great years, and there's been ups and downs, obviously, along the way, and a lot of things that I had learned from the automotive industry that I brought to the construction industry, which allowed us to get some efficiencies, establish ourselves in the market, branding, and so 9 years I've owned it now. And
crazy.
It's, it is. Time flies. I blink, and at times, I say to my wife, "Wow!" We've come a long way in 9 years, but it's been rapid.
Yeah, and I mean that kind of fits you in terms of how I know you anyway, and the pace that you bring to the table every time we get together. So you owned it for 9 years, you worked in it, and then you started building these systems and bringing efficiencies into the business model. And I think a lot of people watching are either business owners, entrepreneurs, business leaders, managers, right? And growing companies. There's a lot of content that exists online around the startup, and there's a lot of great books written about the best companies in the world, but I think in growing a company, there's a lot missing in terms of like accessible content around systems and efficiencies. So can you help us understand a little bit about what kind of systems you look at putting in place and why you believe they're so important?
So coming from automotive, one of the things I learned in automotive that was so valuable today is we put in QS 9000. So quality control systems were brought into place so that it didn't matter the operator on any given day. There was a written procedure on how to do a specific task to achieve an expected outcome. And I thought, when I came into the construction industry, I said, this thing, in spite of itself, you have different people on different job sites. There's no written procedure. The equipment can change day to day, and we still make money doing what we're doing. Imagine if we could have put quality systems in place and have processes that people could follow step by step. That way, you still need to be a tradesperson, but if you can just put those things in place, it would probably accomplish 80% of it would solve 80% of the problems that we were having with delivering a quality product consistently. And one of the challenges that I found is that when I came to this company is, like every growing business, usually what happens is, in construction particularly, you take great tradespeople and you make them into supervisors, project managers. They have absolutely no background in supervision. They're very good tradespeople.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we had the wrong people in the wrong positions. So some of them were actually, the wrong people on the bus. And in the first year, we fired 6 out of 8 supervisors because they weren't aligned with our company core values, if you will. And they certainly weren't going to follow direction and process. So even if I put a written quality plan in place, it wouldn't have mattered. They wouldn't have followed it. So we did that, and that's the first thing is that I had to make sure I had the right people aligned in our company to take us forward. So then we developed the quality control plan, and we made sure that we had supervision out on sites to see our people, train them, steer it through it. And we took that quality system process and we brought that into sales process. When we implemented Salesforce.com, we brought in a consultant to help us with that. We documented our Salesforce plan, and that allowed us to make sure that all of our reps were entering the information the same way. We could report on it. From an owner's perspective, I'm a dashboard person, so while I'm a bean counter, I love to look at pictures and give me 1,000 words. I don't want to jump inside the numbers so much anymore. And when you get to a certain size, you can't do that, but you need to understand from a dashboard perspective where your company's at. In order to do that, you have to have a system for getting the information in place.
Right, yeah, that's super important. And a really interesting perspective.
Yeah, and then the system, further to that is a system to report from an operational perspective how you're doing. One of the things I see in our industry is job costing. I understand general contractors have job costing and they can see where their costs are at, providing the information's entered into the system. For a flooring company like ours, I have job cost reporting to me within 48 hours upon completion of the job. I know where it's at. And while the decisions are made along the way, so we don't wait for a costing summary to be kicked out in order to make decisions. They're being, operations team meets daily. They talk about where are we at? Are we behind on the job? What do we need to do to fix that? But that report card allows me as an owner to sit back and evaluate the effectiveness of our operations department, or see if we're having constant issues in a specific market or with a specific process. Then we can delve back in and say, okay, what's broken in the process? What's happening that our people don't have the information in order to react at the time when it happens, to make good decisions on site, to turn it around quickly.
Huge. So then responsiveness goes up, quality goes up,
our
efficiency goes up, effectiveness of the whole operation just goes up.
Yeah, and you see that in your customer, our customer feedback and client retention. In excess of 70% of our business is repeat customers. So we don't have to go looking too hard for new business. We still have to be competitive with our existing, but our retention rate is high because we have, customer service excellence at all levels. One of the key things for us, our foremen are not allowed to leave the job site without taking the customer on a walkthrough. They have to walk the job and say, how is it? Is it everything that your salesperson said we were going to do? Have I given you everything you expected? Is there anything we should do before we leave?
Cool.
So in our post-installation follow-up, which our salespeople do, is to get on the phone and ask, hey, I just want to check in. Did we install what I said we were going to install? Are you happy with it? How were our people? What did we finish? And usually our motto is under promise, over deliver. So if it's 2 weeks to do it, we'll tell the customer it's 2.5 weeks to finish. We finish in a week and 4 days. And everybody's happy.
So what are some of the symptoms that people might see on a regular basis when systems aren't in place that would give them an indication that, hey, this needs to happen?
Well, you're not making as much money. You're not maximizing margin for sure. So you're going to see the same issue come up over and over and over again because you haven't documented the process to fix it. So if you continue to see the definition of insanity is watching the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. It is still going to be the same.
So then, when it comes to actually documenting the process, who does it?
So you have to engage the team. So the team that is going to do it, the manager that's going to oversee it, and then you need an admin person who's very good at systems. So we have a person who is in our company. She writes all of the sales flow charts. Some are graphs or like a flow chart style. Some are documented processes written. But we sit with a team and we develop, and then we test it, come back, review it, and say, okay, is this the system that we follow? Are there any tweaks and changes we want to make? And then ultimately, the real thing is, have we accomplished the results that we expected? Does that failure come up anymore?
Right.
And if it doesn't, then you've put in
Check.
proper failure mode analysis. Yeah.
So, then a couple of questions then on that, because I feel like there's a lot of people that know they need to do this, but I think there's a lot of people at the same level who don't have the time to do it. So, when you engage the team in this type of a process, are there any lessons that you've learned in doing so that might be able to save someone some time and headache around making it come to life?
As a business owner, your job is to make sure you have the right people in the right positions. If your directive to your reports is such that we document process in our company, you should not have to go further than that. If you have the right people in place, those people love to do that. They will make sure the process is in place and it's done. If you're finding you continue to get pushback from management that don't want to put the processes in place to fix it, then you have the wrong people.
Yeah, that's cool. So then, okay, on the same note, and I love how it's wrong people. If they're not doing it, wrong people. I find sometimes in my experience, when I've worked with process people, there's a tendency to over-process and get too granular sometimes. So how do you kind of manage being broad enough so that it's like digestible and people can use it, but it's specific enough at the same time that it's effective, but not too specific that it's like automating, turning a human into a robot, check.
One of the guiding principles of QS and ISO 9000 that I learned back when we implemented the system is do what you say you're going to do, because that's what you end up auditing to. In a quality system, all you audit to is exactly what you said you're going to do. So don't make the process so overcomplicated. People get confused and think that 7-page quality system is better than a 1-page. It's really not. But when you go back and audit, you should be able to go back and say, you know what, we do those things instinctively. I don't have to look at the process every day. It's part of it. The other part is you have to allow your people enough freedom that you don't micromanage them. They have to be allowed to be able to exercise some sort of judgment or thought process for the skill or the task that they do every day.
Right.
But really, you're just documenting what you said you're going to do, and you have to go back and review it and say, okay, is this too onerous? I mean, that's always part of any system you put in place. Go back and say, is it satisfying what we need it to do? And some people over-engineer it, that it takes so long to do it that we're not making any more money out of it. In fact, we've over-engineered the process to the point that it's costing us time and energy and money, and people are frustrated by it.
Right.
And frustrated people are not efficient.
No, and not fun
or effective.
Yeah, and they're not. Yeah, that's not good for anybody. So then, knowing that you've gone through those, are there any things that people might be able to do to mitigate that from happening, so they don't have to create frustration with their team? Like, how do you know you've engineered it enough, but you're not over-engineering it? What gives you that indication?
In 2006, we implemented Salesforce. We put it into our company. I happen to jump on, and I still to this day have an old email address that I used to set it up. And that's what reminds me in 2006 what I should have done, which I didn't do until 2014, is I hired a consultant.
Right.
So we spent 8 years, 2006 all the way through to 2014. Really, I mean, we did a great job at the time. We were trying to modify a out-of-the-package box system to suit our business.
Right.
Hire a consultant, bring them into at least steer you in the right direction, get you started with a process. Start with a sales process, or start with a process inside your company. For us, it would be polishing concrete. What is our process for polishing concrete?
Right.
And have them walk you through that process there and get an understanding of how not to over-engineer it, but put enough checks in place that you can accomplish the end result, which is to make more money at what we're doing.
Right.
And install these things more efficiently. That's what I would say. Had we hired a consultant back in 2006 to implement Salesforce, we'd be so much further ahead, and our dashboards would be so much more accurate with historical information,
right,
which you make decisions on.
Yeah, that's huge. So when it comes to ISO and QS, what's it, 9,000?
Yeah.
Where do people go for resources on this type of stuff?
There's many consultants. I mean, for me, often what I do is I bounce it off our tech group. So I'll come into tech and say, look, I'm struggling with Salesforce. I want to do certain things with it. I think it's good to have a peer group. If you don't belong to one, they're a great resource to go to. And I'm not trying to advertise for them, but it's proven that businesses in peer groups grow 3 times faster than those that are not.
Ooh.
So that's where I would look to. Or if you're, if you play golf, I mean, talk to your local business people at your golf community and say, hey guys, you know what, I'm looking at this. Does anyone have any input on where I can find a consultant to implement QS or ISO or Salesforce or whatever your processes are?
So then on that note, I think, at least for me, I had this connotation that those types of protocols are for industrial companies. They're for construction and stuff. Can they be implemented anywhere?
A process can be implemented in any business, if you're ever going to grow, it has to get beyond what's up here as an owner in our heads. And an IT company, it could be a lumber yard. I mean, it could be a manufacturing facility, a construction company. It could be a banking industry. I mean, they all have a set of guidelines and ways in which we do it to make sure that we do it consistently across all platforms and all people that are. So I think process is important in every business or every industry that we're in if you want to grow beyond the owner or a select group of people.
Right. So on that note, kind of shifting gears, no pun intended because I'm driving a stick shift, when it comes to getting out of the business, so as an owner, building a company, you've owned it for 9 years now, what kind of things are you looking at? What's on your agenda to get things in place so that you can start to make it like a self-sustaining entity?
Right, and that's what it comes down to. A lot of what we do as owners is we're in the business, we're working on the business, and we struggle with that balance, and usually we're more in the business than on it. But if you can take the time out and bring in a consultant to help facilitate some of that stuff for you, with the goal in mind is that to create a process that's repeatable, so when you're not there, and that's what ultimately I'm doing now, is my staff know that or sometimes they don't know that I'll be in or I won't be in.
Right.
But it doesn't matter because we have the systems in place that people know it is. They know how to execute. They know what's expected of them. And with those processes, that speeds up that process of training people. For me, I'm in the process now of transitioning out of sales.
Right.
I do a lot of sales for our company. And so by having Salesforce and sales process in place, I'm able to move back and people know what the next step in the process is to move it to, a close. So now my job becomes more of a mentoring process because it's how do we deliver that message now?
Right.
And I think for any business owner to get any value and be able to sell your business one day, without process, you're not going to reap the rewards and the value long term. You'll get less for your business ultimately.
Yeah, that's totally fair. And so when a business owner's got a million things to do, we're they got to do sales, they got to make sure the right team's on board, coach, mentor, develop processes. How have you in the past or even today go about prioritizing what project to do next?
It's hard.
Okay, it's not just me.
There's no easy answer. But here's what I can tell you works for me. I have a black book. You've probably seen a million people walk into a black book. But every day what I do is I open my day by listing my priorities. Those are the things that I cannot go home until they are done. There's a to-do list and there's calls that come in. But I cannot finish my day without having those priorities done. There's usually 3 to 5 priorities that have to get done. You also have to block things into your calendar. So if you are a salesperson, you want to prospect on Friday, or if I'm a business owner and I need to do strategic planning, I have to block it into my calendar ahead of schedule. It's a meeting, and you have to be diligent and commit to it. And it's so easy to a customer calls, I want to do Friday at 10 a.m., and you have that strategic planning session scheduled for Friday at 10 a.m.
Yeah,
that is not the end of the world to say to that customer, you know what, actually I already have at 10 a.m. put yourself in the position that appointment, that 10 a.m., in our situation with 50 employees, I owe it to my staff. If I don't do that, I impact 50 other people's lives by not putting the time in to put the strategic plan. So you have to set the time aside, put it into your calendar, and you got to do what you say you're going to do.
And it's so simple, right? Do what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it. But I find a lot of people do kind of fall into that trap when they have a meeting with themselves. It's the first thing to get overwritten. So were you like that before?
No.
You always kept...
You have to become disciplined with it. And after a while, you really get the hang of it. And again, from our perspective, I preach downwards as well. So my staff, they have to put things into their schedule and prioritize it that way. And I always say to them, a customer calls, we have an internal meeting. That customer's meeting has to get scheduled around that internal meeting. That internal meeting is an opportunity time for us to reflect, and talk as a group and solve issues or problems that are going on in our company. In my opinion, it's way more important than a customer meeting. And I don't mean that we're putting us before the customer, but there are other days or times in the schedule that you can accommodate the customer. You just have to ask.
Well, and it's interesting too, because you could argue that having that time together as a team will actually make the customer experience better for all customers, not just the one person who called in who wants a meeting. So I always kind of finish this up with, if there was something you could have told yourself, let's say when you started ownership of the company, so in your case 9 years ago, that now, what would it be?
I want to go before that, and only because I live it today. In that, when I first started, I was in automotive manufacturing, and we were growing at such a rapid rate. I always thought people were a commodity. In that, and remember, I was 27, so I'm running a plant, 85 people, and my thought process was line up a school bus out front, bring in 2 at a time till I tell you we've got the people, and right, if you don't want to be here and you don't want to do it, we're going to say we're going to get out.
Yeah.
Well, that's not how people work. And I found that for me to ever go on vacation, for me to ever get out of this business and have any time personally and have work-life balance, I have to have good people. So I try to, first off, your job and my job now is to make sure that I always have the right people in the right seats on the bus. Because without people, we can't do any of it. And then from that level, when you have the right people in place, then you can talk about process and the strategic plans of downloading that stuff. Because you have their buy-in, you got a team.
Yeah, that's cool.
So yeah.
Right, thanks for
so I would go back and I would be a little bit more diligent in picking people and realize that I couldn't treat them like a commodity.
It's like, if you want to have good people, you got to treat people good.
You got to treat them well.
Or something like that. Yeah.
Or you'll be there. You'll live there.
Right.
So, yeah.
Cool. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, it was a cool experience. I loved it. Thanks,
guys.